What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Pod Scum. This right here, as you all know, is the podcast where we dive into the deep, dark, murky waters with a plethora of legendary guests. I am, of course, your host, your bastard of ceremonies, the number one scumbag, Rex Ruger. That's REXXX. You might also know me as the King of Sleaze, a.k.a. the Hair Metal High Priest, and most importantly, a.k.a. Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. Take a look. Search your feelings. You all know it to be true that you are looking at the son of glam, the front man for the band. Just smoked a few grams. I got a million fans. I'm your ice cream man, Mr. Wop Bop Bop Wop Bam Bam Shazam. Hot damn. Woo! I am feeling good, and of course, I am looking good, as is everybody in the house, including you all out there. You know how I get it done. Right here, baby. Learn it, live it, love it. Coming to you, as always, from the Lavender Lounge of Love, a.k.a. Weed City. New decor here. A few things to revamp up the place a little bit. And one thing that hasn't changed is my co-host, the great Keith Hernandez Puppet. Together, we are bringing you the No Frills podcast. You don't get no frills, but you get something so much better, and that's thrills. And that is looking at the face of a rock star. Plus, we don't know nothing about technology here, so what you see is what you get. It's lo-fi, it's crude, it's all that shit that we love in a good old school podcast. No glitz and glamour here. The glitz and the glamour is right here. The fact that there's a real bona fide rock star sitting here hosting this thing. And also being looked down upon by his actual rock star father. And of course, my fleet of attorneys is on its way to proving conclusively through DNA testing that you are looking at Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. Make no mistake about that. I'm in constant contact. And of course, I am looking for virtuoso level players for Love Sword, my glam sleaze metal passion project. Serious inquiries only. Really, at this point, any inquiries would be great because everybody seems a little intimidated. But I digress because our guest is here, and boy, do we got a good one tonight. A bona fide legend. We're going to get into it with him right now. I am excited. We'll get him here. Are you there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Just don't see him. There he is. How you doing, bud? Man, it's such an honor to have you here, Kevin Wood. Of course, legendary, pioneering, call him what you want, Seattle band Malfunction. And correct me if I'm wrong, but before we jump into the interview, though, there is still a version of Malfunction, though, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's a pay-per-view Malfunction because if I can get a good guarantee, I'll put it together for you. And otherwise, yeah, I've been like putting out Malfunction stuff for many years now. Actually, longer than the vintage Malfunction has been going on. So yeah, it's still an entity.
And when you talk about the vintage Malfunction, when Andy leaves Malfunction in 1988, of course, I'm talking about Kevin's brother, the phenomenally talented Seattle legend, Andy Wood. Were you upset when he leaves in 88 to go do Mother Love Bone? Did you kind of think that you guys were going to be, going through this thing together?
Well, yeah. I was extremely upset because, well, actually, it wasn't like a leaving Malfunction. It was like him joining with some guys that were doing something else. And my whole philosophy at the time was that we get Jeff and Stone in Malfunction, we round out our lineup, and we proceed with Plan A.
Yeah.
Of course, Plan B was what happened with Mother Love Bone. They got a lot of steam under their, they caught on.
Yeah.
And so, Andy couldn't really bail out of that. But Malfunction really never did break up. And I have to add that having conversation with Andy, he was not happy with Mother Love Bone. I mean, he was probably not happy with Malfunction because we needed a bass player and a rhythm guitar player, and Stoney and Jeff were the guys that were going to do that. Anyway, it was kind of a bummer, and of course the ultimate bummer happened when Andy passed away, and it couldn't be revived in the way it was. So yeah.
And I feel like after watching the in-depth documentary that that I know the story and the story of your family and everything, so good, and that documentary is so well done. But for people that haven't seen it though, what was your upbringing like? Like, when did you know that music was a path that that you specifically were going to take? Did you have aspirations to do anything else? Because it seems like you guys were in a very you guys were very creative early on.
Well, yeah, music was huge in our family.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough to move to Germany when I was probably about 9 or 10. Lived there for 3 years without any TV. And so music became the way that we would entertain ourselves. We'd listen to the music. We'd, as a family, listen to music. I remember being so turned on to classical music. And of course, I was listening to the American Top 40. Armed Forces Radio is like my best buddy.
Yeah.
We lived and breathed music. It was all, very, very important in our lives.
And I'm interested though, when you guys start Malfunction, because Andy just seems so prolific and just had so much creativity oozing out of him, and you as well. What was the creative process like? Did you guys as brothers, because we've seen that dynamic in other bands, sometimes it works great. I ate like an AC/DC. Sometimes the guys in Oasis, maybe it doesn't work so much and they bang heads a lot. What was the creative process like when you and Andy were creating together? Did someone kind of take the lead? Did you guys collaborate?
Yeah, we collaborated. I would write a song, we'd get together and hammer it out, work it out. Andy was the singer. I would come up with lyrics sometimes, and Andy would come up with lyrics sometimes, and sometimes it was all, an Andy lyric and music thing. And we were all on board. See, the cool thing about Malfunction was it was a complete democracy.
Yeah.
We, as 3 guys, we all agreed on one thing, and that's the way it was going to be. And there was no problem with any sort of power struggle at all. It was very copacetic.
Yeah. And I get the sense, especially from watching the documentary, with Andy having such a larger than life, personality. And, I've heard the stories, he'd be playing like a small, bar gig, but he'd be playing it like he's playing some big, huge stadium. And he was obviously very flamboyant and into the whole pageantry of rock and roll. And, he really seemed like he really got the performance side of it. He was there to just do more than sing. He was really there to put on a show.
Well, yeah, he was a great showman.
Yeah.
I mean, he would tell jokes in between songs, and he had a great way with the crowd, and it was all good. I mean, we all, in our own way, were playing this role of huge rock stars, and it was and of course Andy caught the limelight because he was bold enough to wear the face makeup,
yeah,
and be the front guy, right?
Yeah.
But it was equal across the board as far as our performances and how we as a team really put it together for the crowds in Seattle at those times.
Yeah. And I think historically, looking back, I think people that aren't very well versed and schooled on the whole Seattle scene, I don't think they really realize and this is upsetting to me as someone who loves a lot of those bands though, but it really seems like Mother Love Bone was really at the forefront of really breaking that whole scene, because if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know about the actual chronological order, but Mother Love Bone, right around the time of Andy's untimely passing, was really poised, to do big things. And I think they, if I'm not mistaken, they had their foot in the door before. Well, obviously there was no Pearl Jam. That came as a fallout of Mother Love Bone. But nobody else was really off and running doing anything, were they?
Well, Soundgarden was actually
Okay.
Soundgarden was the band that was on the forefront of getting a deal,
Yeah.
and everybody was watching Soundgarden. Everybody was trying to like, what do they have that we don't? And of course, Malfunction. We felt like we had it all,
Yeah.
but we had no connections. We were trying to get those connections and trying to get the record deal. And Mother Love Bone kind of, I don't know. At the time, it was like they were trying to be Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses was taking off, and
Yeah.
Duff, right, being from Seattle, sleeping in his car, wakes up, joins the band that would be the next big thing, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So everybody was thinking, "Wow, that's the way to go." And of course, in my opinion, in my view, Mother Love Bone was just trying to follow those footsteps, but being based out of Seattle.
Yeah.
And they were definitely copying to that kind of sound. They were emulating GNR. They were emulating as best they could Aerosmith, and they were sort of selling out.
Yeah.
Andy he could tell. I mean, he knew. We talked about this. It was a big sellout, and it wasn't. In retrospect, yeah, it made a dent in the Seattle scene and whatnot, but it wasn't like the true reality of what Andy was all about.
Right.
He kind of put on a moniker to play along with that game, and unfortunately, I think that was contributory in his demise.
Yeah.
He was not happy in being in Mother Love Bone.
And I think a lot of people associate, excuse me, that Seattle scene with it was a snapshot, a moment in time, from I don't know, call it 1990 to 1995, 96. But there's been great music coming out of Seattle for a long time. Why did it take so long for that microscope to kind of drop down? And why was it the early 90s?
That's a good question. But I'll tell you who was responsible for a lot of that was Sub Pop and their signing of Nirvana.
Yeah.
The Nirvana, I mean, Mother Love Bone aside, Mother Love Bone got a deal. Who knows how far they would have gotten? Soundgarden got a deal, and they struggled. But a cool band like Nirvana, who came out with this, and it was really grunge.
Yeah.
Grunge at the time was these young post-punk bands that were coming out. They sounded raunchy. They were rough around the edges.
Yes.
And that was grunge. So Nirvana comes out, and they're the best band of that category.
Yes.
And I mean, you listen to it, and you can't deny the fact that out of all the bands that came out that were kind of like that, they were the best.
Yeah.
Kurt. I mean, Jesus Christ, the guy had a voice that signaled the grunge era.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you look back at I hate to play devil's advocate and think of, what could have been, but even looking back at the short time, that Andy was a part of that scene, what kind of a legacy, and of course, you're in that circle, you're in the music world. Does Mother Love Bone get the due credit that that it deserves, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, because it's a pivotal band, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys in Mother Love Bone came out of Green River. They're enormously popular in the underground world in Seattle. And I mean, it's a group of guys that strived. They put together something entertaining. And yeah, I mean, they made their mark, and I mean, Jesus Christ, continue to make their mark.
Yeah.
As one of the biggest concert draws in the entire world. So yeah, I mean, you can't deny the fact that there was a machinery behind that. And we're not talking like a machinery that was like corporately, not like a corporate machinery, but like a machinery of music.
Right.
Stone and Jeff, they were like a factory of music. And I will never say that they are not deserved of the credit that is given to them by decades of success.
Yeah. Was there anybody in Andy's life, and of course you would know this being family, was there anyone in Andy's life at that point in time, like right around that time that Mother Love Bone was getting big, and then obviously we get the unfortunate incident that took Andy's life. Was there anybody in his life at that time who was privy to what was going on, or that could have intervened, or was it just one of those things that just was not going to be stopped? I mean, was Andy too far into his addiction?
Well, I was clean and sober.
Yeah.
During those years, and I offered to give him a shoulder to lean on. I mean, I cleaned up my act, and I was really there for him. And I think that the fact that I was not able to be there for him, and that the band tried to keep me away from him as much as possible. And had I been able to, freely express myself around him and not be like pushed to the sidelines. When Mother Love Bone first took off, it was hard to get a hold of Andy, and a lot of the times guys would try to keep me away from him, try to keep me separated. And it was, partial to the fact that they had stole my lead singer and my drummer for the time, and they were like off to the races. So they didn't let me around, And a part of it is too, is being clean and sober. You can't hang with people who are still using, because that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And these guys were not. These guys were not the angels that they expect everybody to think they were. I mean, I'm not taking. This is so many years ago, and we're young men, and the vitality of our lives, living mostly from our egos. So, and I was part of that. I know. So, I'm not like saying it should have been, it would have been, but those were the dynamics,
And for those who haven't seen the Malfunction documentary, and again, I encourage people to go watch it, but it got so in depth, and you really feel like you were that you really kind of grew up with you and Andy, and your mom being on there, Tony, and obviously very candid about the tumultuous elements of their marriage and how that kind of spilled over onto you guys. Do you think that's what was really that really propelled Andy's use? Because Andy really seems like a guy who's marching to the beat of his own drum. I don't think he's a guy that's sucked into any kind of peer pressure, or he's doing the drugs for any other reason. Do you think it was previous pain in his life? Do you think it was something that he thought helped his creativity?
Well, yeah. I mean, various substances will spark your creativity, and I mean, people have known that for eons, and it was unfortunate that it would take his life like that, but it was also part of the culture of the times where it was almost expected of musicians to be out there on the edge. I mean, everybody. I mean, you look at the Led Zeppelin guys, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. It's very highly publicized that these guys were taking drugs and getting a lot of inspiration from them. And so as a young person, you say, well, I'm going to do that too, and we'll see how it goes. And sure enough, I mean, you come up with some great ideas. And, it's all part of the whole rock and roll thing of the 70s, and the excesses. It was, I think everybody was doing it.
Yeah. Were you very surprised about, and obviously, aside from Andy, that Seattle scene, you mentioned Kurt, obviously Lane Staley, certainly lost a lot of people from that scene. Were you surprised about Cornell? Cornell kind of surprised me, and I saw in an interview where Mark Lanigan said, that one kind of snuck up and kind of fucking, kind of bowled me over too. I feel like everyone kind of viewed Cornell, even though he'd had his demons in the past, and I asked this because he was Andy's roommate for a while. He always seemed like the one that everyone kind of like looked at as like he's the guy in the scene with his head screwed on straight. He's well adjusted. I mean, well, how the hell is he killing himself? He
was not adjusted. I mean, I can't say that I was his best buddy or anything, but
Right.
he was in town. I went and saw him and went backstage and talked to him for a little while. And we reminisced about the old times, and he's all together, but still the old times. I mean, basically, the guy liked to party and he liked to get hammered, and he liked to take drugs, and which was now different than anybody else.
Right.
I can't say why or how the whole thing happened, but the guy was not squeaky clean.
Right. Right.
Nobody was.
Right.
Yeah,
it was kind of the parlance of the times, kind of.
Because his personality was that, everything's good, and he was so good looking too, and everybody thought, well, this is the guy who's just got it made,
Yeah.
And of course, out of all of the people in Seattle, I'd have to say he was my favorite songwriter, singer. I was literally blown away by his acoustic set when I went and saw him. And
Amazing.
you usually think, oh, acoustic set, that's going to be just baloney, and some guy up there screaming away.
Yeah.
It was so amazing. I was thinking, the guy doesn't really need the band.
Right.
He's got it all. Yeah. I mean, he was so talented, and he's so nice, and such a personable guy, but at the same time, I don't know, the craziness that comes with the lifestyle, being on the road,
pressure,
being away from the people you love, the pressure. It's a tragedy, but it's not surprising.
And he said famously in that documentary how much he admired the fact that when he did live with Andy, the two of them both had their had their recording devices, and I thought it was very poignant when he said, I would be very highly critical of my stuff after I put it down and go back and do a lot of editing. And Andy seemed to be very free with the creative process, where he just kind of trusted, hey, I'm here in the moment, and this is what I created. That's certainly a lot of confidence in your creativity, though. Andy didn't strike me as someone who lacked any kind of confidence.
He was very confident. I mean, everything that he did actually had merit to it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the kind of guy that could turn on a radio and switch the dials and make something entertaining happen out of it.
Yeah.
He just had something going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff, it would not catch people's ears in a way that they'd go, oh man, that's just because it was eclectic.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people miss about, people think about Andy in the context of Mud Love Bone. Mud Love Bone was a structured style, a structured, portrayal of rock and roll. Like I said, like Guns N' Roses or something like that, right? He was in that kind of genre. But in Andy's world, it was more about Gary Newman. It was more about avant-garde, Brian Eno. It was like anything goes. And not that those guys are schlocks or anything, by the way. He was all about making something new, expressing himself. And that's where I came from too, because it was okay, well, what's been done? Let's do something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you and Andy are so prolific creatively. I'm curious. Take me a little bit inside of what your own individual creative process is like for you. Even here, present day, when you're going to create music, are you one of these kind of guys you see a lot of guys in the scene that are very, very disciplined? Like they say, from 1 to 5, I'm going to go in that room and I'm going to write music. Are you one of those structured, disciplined guys, or are you one of those guys where creativity is just kind of, you could get a spark throughout the day or whatever and just be jotting stuff down? How do you work?
Well, I do like to stay in a structure of electric guitar and heavy music. I mean, you have to do that. But at the same vein, the inspiration, you never know when it's going to happen.
Right.
But it's not going to happen unless for me, it's not going to happen unless I'm playing my guitar. Unless the guitar's in my hand.
Yeah.
I'm going, okay, here it goes. And the first thing that comes out is okay, well, what goes along with that? And then build and build and build until you have something cohesive. The inspiration is always just a minute period of time away. It's there, and and it's kind of one of the things that keeps me coming back, because we have an unlimited supply of it. Inspiration, and the inspiration comes for me when I have the guitar in my hand and I'm plugged in, and I'm maybe not going to write a song, but all of a sudden I'm saying, well, this is cool, let's go. And for you as a guitar player, you've been doing it so long, and I'm sure you're on record somewhere is citing who your influences are. So, to put a different spin on it, who are some guys whose guitar playing you just really love as a fan? Like, if you hear them on the radio or you hear them somewhere, you really pay attention because you love their playing. Who are you a fan of? Oh man, almost everybody. I mean, I really love good guitar that comes out and it expresses emotion.
Yeah.
And it's got good tone. It's articulated. I mean, the guys that I listened to when I was a teenager, of course, Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yep.
And then the Judas Priest. I mean, I was so inspired by KK Downing, right? He's not the best guitar player in Priest, but I stood in front of him at a show in Seattle when he was doing the Sinner solo, and this was before they got big.
Yeah.
The guy was giving it all out, and he was just like putting on the greatest display. It was all whammy bar and just like that crazy. Oh man, it really made me want to do that kind of thing. Just like put it all out there, And I think. Of course, everybody who's really good, I really like. And there are tons of really good guys out there that I really like. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
It seems like the instrument's always kind of being taken to the next level and the envelope's always being pushed.
Exactly. And I'm trying to stay on top of that, because I practice every day, and I work on it. And I look at different nowadays, back when I was a kid, right? You had to turn the record on, play along with it,
right?
Hope God you could figure the shit out, right?
Yeah.
And go back, but I was always too lazy to go back.
Yeah,
I would just blow through the record and play through it, and I'd play through it again and again and again and again until I could play along with the record.
Yeah.
But I'd be playing my own thing over the top of the record.
Right.
I kind of developed my own style. And I think a lot of the guys these days don't have that, where for me, it was all inspiration, because I came from a culture of jamming.
Yes.
People in the neighborhood, we get together, we take some acid, we jam all the way through the night. Or even if we didn't do that, I'd be at home, I'd turn on the radio and jam with everything that was on there, try to pick out every little bit that I could without stopping, because and then you hit a part and you go, I don't know how that's going to, I have no idea how to play that. But instead of trying to figure that part out, blow something over the top of it that works.
Yeah.
So, I came out with my own style, which a lot of the guys of my generation did. You look at Dave Mustaine. Megadeth.
Yes, a distinct sound.
Distinct sound.
Yeah,
stuff like that. Where it's all because you're just jamming and you're making it happen. So, I really, I played along with the Inge Malmsteen records back in the 80s so much that I could play along with Rising Force note for note.
Yeah,
but I didn't know what I was doing.
Right. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, and this may be a little bit of a loaded question, but obviously after Andy's passing, for people that don't know, but I think most people are pretty keyed into the story now. Obviously Andy's passing, Stone and Jeff kind of pick up the pieces, and then we get Pearl Jam, and Pearl Jam has gone on to quietly become one of the better, American bands as far as like longevity. What's your assessment of Pearl Jam, though? Are you a fan of what they do?
Well, yeah, I like their live presentation.
Yeah.
I was disappointed that the first couple albums didn't have guitar solos for the most part. I mean, they did, but they were not like featured. They, And I really like McCready's playing. It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
And I like the band. And Eddie Vedder is an awesome singer, but I'm never really big fan because it just didn't tick my boxes,
Yeah.
I'm more along the lines of I like dramatic music that's like I'm kind of a metalhead.
Me too.
You know?
Yeah, me
Merciful Fate was it for me. Merciful Fate, Slayer,
Yes.
bands like that,
me too.
The dark energy and the shrieking and the just over the top, like making it sound as evil as possible. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you made a Malfunction EP in 2021 called Glow. And what was it like to go through that process and look over and see somebody performing as Malfunction, doing vocals, and it wasn't Andy? Is that an easy transition for you to make it, or is it hard for you to be accepting of somebody else in that role?
Well, Jeff, he's a good singer and he's a great guy.
Yeah.
Jeff Stark.
Yeah.
And the singers that I've had working with me in Malfunction in the past, they've all been good guys. They've all been competent singers. But I think that the problem is that it doesn't sound like Andy. And, you look at the way that Leonard Skinner reintroduced themselves into the scene, and they got a singer that sounded just like Van Zandt, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But I think it might have been a little bit of a mistake to, use guys that sounded completely different like that.
Yeah.
Although it was fun, and we did make some damn good music.
Yeah.
It's still for the core fans, or the fans of yesteryear. It didn't tick the boxes for them. I think.
Yeah. Right.
Although, the jury's still out. In today's world, I mean, there's been absolutely no publicity over it, and there's been no big push. I put it out on my own, and so having some big money behind it might have made a difference. It might make it. We'll see.
Was it hilarious to you, being a Pacific Northwest guy your whole life? And we talked about this a little earlier about how great music has been coming out of Seattle for so many years. I mean, people forget. I mean, even a guy like Jimi Hendrix, he was from fucking, the Pacific Northwest. But like when you look at just that time when grunge, for lack of a better word, really caught on there in the early to mid 90s. Was it absolutely mind-blowing as someone who lived in that area to all of a sudden see the whole world just suddenly wearing fucking flannel, and grunge was like the kind of like, the big fucking trend, and everybody was acting very, disaffected and brooding, and I mean, it really caught on with teenagers, and it really became like a scene, and it did also end up being the whipping boy for a lot of those 80s bands, because it seemed like when that decade ended, and I know a lot of the quote unquote hair metal bands, that whole decade was about the singing and the getting the chicks and the having the fun, and the music was a lot of, it seemed like, style over substance. And then along comes this really deep music that's really rooted in powerful emotion, and it certainly had a dark edge to it. What was that time like as somebody who was living right in it, though? Because it seemed weird. Like suddenly there's just this big spotlight, boom, on Seattle, Yeah,
actually at the time it all kind of made sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, after Malfunction, I formed a band called Fire Ants with my other brother, Brian, singing.
Yep.
And it was like right in there with that whole style.
Yeah.
But it contrived. You'd have people coming from all over the country. They'd go to Seattle and pretend they were from Seattle, and they would try to get deals and try to be a Seattle band.
Yeah.
There were bands all over the world that caught that style. But for us, that was like, the evolution of the scene and where we were all coming from. And my brother Brian was like one of the better crooners of that era. And we did Fire Ants and Devilhead in the 90s, and had a pretty good level of success, compared to a lot of other people that were, giving it a try at that time. So yeah, it didn't surprise me at all. It seemed like, finally, this is like starting to happen, and I'm here.
Yeah.
And I got a foot in the door, because I've been here for forever.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a pioneer. You know, you're a pioneer. You're at the forefront of a scene, more or less. You know, it's quite an honor. You know, to be like, you know, to be viewed that way. And I certainly hope that people, you know, view Andy that way as well, because, you know, in the pantheon of all those great performers out there in Seattle, you know, it's frustrating to think of him sometimes getting lost in that shuffle of the Lane Staleys and the Chris Cornells and the Kurt Cobains, you know, because I feel like he was every bit as talented, if not more so than those guys, you know, but just, you know, as you said earlier, Mother Love Bone was just starting to get that traction, and then the plug is kind of pulled on him.
Yeah.
Which was very unfortunate.
Yeah. I know. It's like, you know, Andy never really got to experience the full force of the movement that came after his passing.
Yeah.
I think he carried the torch for it, and he was an iconic figure of what was to happen. And nobody can deny the fact that he was a great showman,
right,
great songwriter. But when you listen to his delivery, he didn't sound at all like what came after.
No, you're right.
A crooner kind of voice that became the signature sound of Seattle.
Right.
You know?
Right. A lot of those guys had more of a darker bend to them, but Andy seemed like, you know, and again, you know, going back and citing the documentary though, Andy seemed though like full on, like, you know what I mean, like he totally embraced the idea of being a rock star, where a lot of those guys like seem to be like anti-rock star.
He was total rock star.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, he loved David Lee Roth.
Yes.
And, you know, everybody did. I did too. I mean, yeah. David Lee Roth was one of the guys that I witnessed.
He's up there for a reason.
Dude, the guy was like, you know, I mean, I went to see Halen for the Women and Children First tour.
Yeah.
I missed them the time before when they opened for Sabbath, right? Yep. The first tour. But I went to see them. Took this double acid, right? Sitting in the stands, watching this guy go to work, and I'm realizing everybody in the Coliseum, every single person in here is riveted on this man.
Yeah.
And he's putting on a show that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because of the acid, but it was like, yeah, he had them in the palm of his hands. And Andy was like that. He took that big rock star thing of the 70s, and he portrayed it on stage in Seattle, in the Seattle pub scenes while we were in Malfunction.
Yeah, yeah.
On spandex, he had the makeup. He was like the total glam hair band guy, but we weren't playing that kind of music.
Right.
Because basically we couldn't. We didn't really know what the hell we were doing.
Right.
We were just coming up with stuff that was cool, and that we could play.
Yeah.
You know?
and you know, again, going back to the documentary though, and you know, certainly this is public domain, you know, and I applaud the fact that you guys put it out there, but you know, again, getting back to Andy and like why, you know, the trajectory of his life went in the direction that it did. You know, something very poignant your mother said in the documentary, where like, you know, the tumultuous marriage between your parents, it seemed like Andy wanted to be like the consummate guy who fixed things and brought happiness to people. But deep inside though, you know, did that tortured side of him ever really heal? And do you think that was maybe some of where the drug addiction stemmed from?
Yeah, it could have been. I don't know. We all had similar experiences growing up.
Yeah.
You know, I was the oldest.
You're right.
And so I had a role that would coincide with being the oldest, as being like the stable one, the one that had to grow up the first, you know.
Yeah.
And he was the baby, so he had a lot of leeway in what he could do, and not a lot of criticism, because,
right,
you know, being a parent, you know, your first one, you come down on them hard.
Yeah.
The second one, you go, oh, okay, I'm not going to fight this battle because it's not worth it.
Right.
You know, I don't know that is an accurate description of what was going on with him. I think that he just got caught up in wanting to make good music, and he took substances to, expand that ability. You know, right or wrong, or, like I said before, you know, in the 70s and such, you had people publicly talking about their inspiration and how they
Yes.
used substances and how it changed their musical direction. So naturally, you know, a kid in the 80s is going to say, well, let's do that and keep it coming. And you know, believe me, everybody was doing it. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just him. And he was a happy guy. And I don't think that and he was and he, you know, not only was he happy, but he was driven.
Yeah.
I don't think my parents' divorce or any of the family dynamics had anything to do with him being sad and taking drugs.
Yeah.
I think he just did it because it was fun and it was inspiring. Because he was the reason why he was happy was because he is a happy person.
Yeah.
You know?
I get that sense from him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the documentary kind of portrays that, you know, in a bad light because, you know, it was my mom who actually talked about that. And of course,
Right.
she was going through this tragedy early on, and that footage was shot at a time where she's very vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to make sense of it.
Right.
Whereas she added a lot of stuff in there that possibly didn't really apply.
Right.
It
Right.
was
Right.
more about her trying to make sense of it than
And
anything.
And dealing with her own emotions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, going back a couple of years, you know, to 2020, when you know sort of the world got turned upside down with this whole COVID thing. How did that affect what you were doing personally or creatively at that time?
Well, you know, I thought I was going to get COVID and die, and I was thinking that, oh my God, I better start recording.
Yeah.
I need to,
I better write my Stairway to Heaven quick.
Exactly, right? So I was freaking out about it, and I, you know, started getting a little bit more serious, you know.
Yeah.
Put stuff out there. I remember like, well, I got to get a camera and start putting YouTube videos up and just like, and then get serious about like getting guys together and recording stuff. So, you know, I mean, I hadn't been touring at the time, and so I didn't really put a dent in my touring schedule because, like I said, you know, touring is expensive, and it's more expensive now than it ever has been. But at the time, I had thrown around some touring concepts and did some shows and traveled around. It was hella expensive doing it on my own, and it's a dude, you know, you don't know. I mean, hell, I remember I played in Milan one night, and there was a big soccer game across town. Nobody came to the show. I mean, some people did, but it wasn't packed out because everybody was watching the fucking soccer game.
They take it seriously over there. Yeah. They don't fuck around with their soccer. Yeah.
Yeah, they love that stuff. I don't understand it, and it's not football.
I'll take a good band over a soccer game any day. I mean, that's not even a close call for me. I mean, but that's just me, though. I guess we're not of that European ilk. You know what I mean? Like where we get the whole soccer craze.
Yeah, I have no idea where that comes from. I find it a completely boring game, and there's nothing going on. And you know, for advertisers, there's no room for commercials either. So,
no, there's not. No,
it'll never go over here. I mean, how could it?
So when you do this Glow EP, what was the process like for coming up with that material? Is that pretty much like you taking the lead on that?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I made up all the stuff, all of the material on everything that came out. The Monument CD. Actually, I did have some songs that were co-written by Andy, actually, when he made them up on bass. But yeah, and All Hail the Crown, and actually, I didn't write every single song on that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way I've always been. I make up the songs and I get the band together, and I'm the captain of the ship, you know.
And what capacity is and forgive me for not knowing, I don't know if he was on Glow or like what his involvement is, man. He's always the quiet, unassuming one in there. But Reagan Hagar.
Now Reagan didn't play on Glow.
Okay.
He played on the Monument CD. But he, it was kind of a bummer because the Monument CD was supposed to be Malfunction's rebirth.
Yep.
And I, marketed it as that. Unfortunately, Regan did not want to play under the Malfunction moniker because he had emotional difficulties dealing with Andy not being there in that regard, right?
Okay.
So we played around with calling it From the North, and it was like a compromise. And so I continued playing. He didn't want to play with Sean because they had a real love-hate relationship where it was on again, off again.
Yep.
And then Sean didn't like the bass player that I had chosen for the project. There was a lot of like this, turmoil with the personalities. So I thought, okay, let's just do something else. Put out the All Hail the Crown CD. Regan had played drums on it. And Mike Hummel did. And I brought in another guy, Rob Day, to play bass. And then, but I kept Sean because, the guy's got a golden voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
How to, I mean, you can't deny the fact that the guy, you put him in front of a mic and you put a hard rock band behind him, and it's just magic.
You got gold. Yeah.
You got gold.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? Right.
Yeah.
So I went with Sean, and then after that kind of all fizzled out, I thought, well, let's do some more Malfunction. I got another singer, Jeff Loftus, who had a lot of power and a lot of ideas. I started like going on tour with him and put out a couple singles actually with him.
Yep.
Then, there was not a lot of traction. People get antsy. They, a little upset with, nothing going on. So they bail on you. And before you know it, I'm looking for a new singer.
Yeah.
So I grabbed Jeff Stark, who is he's a sweet guy. He's talented. He's really great to work with. And I'll work with him for that particular release. And but that at the same time I'm realizing this guy, none of these guys sound like Andy.
Right.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we need somebody who sounds like Andy.
Yeah. Is that guy out there somewhere? Yeah,
there's guys out there like that. I mean, hell, I can sound like Andy if I want to, but it's kind of play the guitar and sing. I just have that capacity. I mean, I can sing and play the guitar, right? But if I'm singing and playing the guitar, I start noodling.
Yeah.
I can sing and noodle at the same time. Yeah, so.
Now we talked about Nirvana. We touched on Pearl Jam a little bit, but I certainly don't want to. If people's knowledge runs deep about the Seattle scene, they will know that there were certainly lots of other bands. I mean, Green River, the U-Men. I mean, there's all kinds of bands. Given a whole, given looking at the whole sum of that scene. Are there bands there, that you really loved? I mean, obviously you spoke glowingly about Nirvana and Soundgarden, and you certainly emphasized that you like the metal kind of sound. I always kind of thought that Soundgarden, had a nice metal bend to them. Even Alice in Chains, what they did to a certain extent, had a little bit of metal to it. But are there bands out of those bands, that we haven't mentioned from that scene that you liked what they did?
Well, let me think about it. Unfortunately at the time I didn't like those bands at all. This took a lot of time, of retrospect to realize, Alice in Chains, Lane Staley.
Yeah.
That guy was for real, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It took me a long time to realize Soundgarden, Kim Thayil was, a good guitar player because, at the time I felt like I could blow doors over him.
Yeah.
And no reason why he should even be trying to play lead guitar.
Yeah.
That was where I was at the time.
Right.
Which is, I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
I had like this feeling that, there was nobody who was picking up the guitar in any of these bands that was really worth the recognition. But at the time, being a guitar-centric person, that's kind of where you're at.
Yeah.
And not really listening to the thing as a whole, and not really thinking, well, oh my God, they've got a vocalist that fucking blows doors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, there probably are bands out there that, as far as like the grunge era goes, one of my favorite bands is Stone Temple Pilots, and they turned into a grunge band.
Yeah.
And those guys were like, they ticked all the boxes of that genre and that era.
Yeah.
They're like masters of what they were doing. And there were other bands that could do the same thing, like, you know, Silverchair. I'm not, you know, wasn't a big fan, but I listened to them and thought, wow, these guys really nailing it, right? But as far as like, I think Grunt Truck was really good. That other band that came out of Grunt Truck, what was that band?
Tad?
Yeah.
Tad? Was it Tad?
Tad. They didn't come out of Grunt Truck, right?
I don't know. Tad was the big guy there. Tad Doyle, right? Wasn't he the?
Tad Doyle, yeah. And Screaming Trees.
Love him. I got Mark's poster right there. Love him. One of my favorite vocalists of all time. Yeah, I love him.
And even Candlebox.
Yes.
I mean, I wasn't a huge fan, but over time I appreciated what they did. And as far as like, you know, I mean, good, a bit solid rock band. Jesus Christ, man, they were great.
Yeah.
But you know, none of these bands had the edge, the dark edge. Even Alice in Chains, which was the most metal of those bands, they didn't do it for me because they didn't have the dramaticness. They didn't have like the over the top, like the craziness that you love in good metal music. That the singer that can wail, or even if he's not wailing, the screaming and the you know, I mean, a huge Slayer fan, and Merciful Fate, and I was totally into that genre of music. That kind of, so that's what I was trying to bring to Malfunction, actually.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, thinking about Malfunction, my influence there, I was so into Discharged, and I thought that Discharge, if you took Discharge and turned it into like metal, right?
Yep.
And put some good solos on it, it would be like, you know, it's actually what happened with Slayer and Metallica. It was like the evolution of rock and roll.
Yeah. Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And I really felt like in Malfunction, that in that part of it, I was kind of missed out because I was pushing for that, whereas Andy was pushing more for like a Mark Bolan, T-Rex kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was always pushing for harder edge, or well, more metal, you know, the metal revival stuff.
Yeah.
I'm in Old Judas.
Yeah.
Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, you know, in retrospect, my influence on the sound, which came out of what I liked, formulated what became the Seattle sound. It was like, well, we have pop music, but we have a hard edge.
Right.
You know, and it's when I first listened to Nevermind, the first thing that came to my head is this is like Black Sabbath punk.
Yeah. You know? That's accurate. Yeah. I agree. And I found it hilarious because I watched before he passed away. I watched an excellent interview with Mark Lanigan, and where he was trying to pitch early Nirvana to the SST label, and they quote, you know, and the way he said it, they didn't seem to get it. And I remember him in the interview laughing, like, you know, what was not to get? Like, these were great songs, well written songs. Like, I mean, how are you missing the boat on Nirvana? You know, I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Mind-boggling, you know, like.
I know. I mean, I wasn't never a huge Nirvana fan. I was, you know, always Chad Channing's one of my friends, and I thought that Bleach sounded great, and I thought that was, you know, monumental for Chad, and I was asked to jam with Nirvana, but you know, I was kind of into my own thing. But yeah, I totally agree. The heaviness was there. The message was there, and it was just like, you know, how could they go wrong? Really?
It resonated with people. It did. It did. And it's a shame that it was so short-lived, because it really seemed like it was lightning in a bottle, and then it was gone. You know, I mean, even before, and you know, it kind of parallels the exact same thing with Mother Love Bone. You know, you felt like, wow, we're right on the cusp of this band really breaking big, and then kind of the wheels fall off, which was very unfortunate. You know, I mean,
yeah, I know.
I mean, it sucked. It sucked because now, even when I listen back to all the Seattle bands collectively, though, I still always revert back to Mother Love Bone because it really does have, you know, you talk about checking the boxes. It checks so many boxes for me, and I think, you know, the majority of that has to do with Andy's performance because, you know, me being 50 years old, I love that era of 80s rock, you know, call it hair metal, call it whatever. But there were some great bands, some great songs, and the showmanship. And, you know, I always tell people that, you know, who ask or inquire about Mother Love Bone, I always say that Andy to me, you know, I mean, was the David Lee Roth of that scene. So it's funny that we brought him up because he really seemed like that guy. And I love the way Chris Cornell puts it. You know, where he kind of says that like everybody in that scene kind of seemed like rock stars, but then Andy was kind of like that beam of light, like above everybody, though. Like he really was like the persona of a rock star all the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's a totally accurate assessment. I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah,
because it's true. Andy was the consummate rock star.
Yeah.
And it bled into his personal life, his whole being, really. I mean, sure, he had downtime, right? Everybody has. But at the same time, it was all about it.
Yeah.
There was no contingency plan.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
now when you think about the time, you know, around the time that he passed, you know, and this is not to impugn her in any way, but was there anything that Xana, his girlfriend at the time, could have done, or was she trying to reach him at all? Because I know from being a married guy for 25 years that obviously like a good woman behind you can really fucking straighten you out. And I'm sure mine has straightened me out more times than, you know, I care to remember. And you know, over a 25-year period, you know, was there anything that she was trying to do or could have done in that situation?
She was a young woman at the time.
Too young.
And I don't think she had the capability of doing anything that would have been constructive. You know, Andy was worried about her all the time. He was worried about losing her. I think she probably did her fair share of catting around, right?
Yeah.
Making him jealous.
Yeah.
And that was not healthy. And, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a rock star or not.
Right.
You have that going on in your life.
Sure.
You know, turn your life upside down and you're
Yeah.
going to be freaking out about it, especially if, you know, he was totally in love with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Body, because he just depended on her. And you know, and she was so young. They were both young. You can't expect her to do something that was not in her capability to do.
Yeah.
And you know, I have no malice for her at all. I mean, she was like barely 20.
Yeah. Not emotionally equipped to deal with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not like life. This is not Little House on the Prairie here.
Right.
I mean, in an apartment in Seattle, and you're part of like a growing rock and roll scene. So it's like, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, and another poignant thing I thought that Chris Cornell touched on there, and of course, you know, he certainly had a different relationship than a lot of the other people in that Seattle scene. Whereas him and Andy, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, were roommates. You know, their relationship deepened over time. But he did say that a lot of people will say that the birth or the death of the scene. You know, a lot of people, you know, would surmise that it was when Kurt took his own life. But, you know, Chris always seemed to point at it was walking into that hospital room and seeing Andy hooked up to all that stuff. And that was really where it felt like that was really the gut punch to a lot of those kids at that time. You know what I mean? Who were in that scene.
Yeah. I mean, it was a gut punch. I mean, because everybody, you know, young people think they're invincible.
Yeah.
Even though they see it happening all around them. And at some point you see it enough and you realize, no, we're not invincible.
Right. And at one point it was pretty confusing, right? Because Chris made it sound like, you know, and I believe, you know, and I'm paraphrasing here, but from what I remember from the documentary was that Chris was on tour and he kind of got that phone call and it's like, you know, you got to come quick. You know, Andy's not good. He's going to die. He's not going to die. Did it really seem touch and go for a little while? Like, was there any hope at any point in time?
Well, yeah, of course you expect a miracle or you hope for a miracle.
Right.
But day to day, it was getting grimmer and grimmer.
Yeah.
And you know, at first we thought, okay, he could come out of it. And then as time went by, you know, the doctors were up front saying, you know, as time goes by, it's less likely that this is going to turn out well for you guys.
Yeah.
On the last day, there's no brain activity.
Yeah.
I think we should probably call it.
Yeah.
And I remember, well, you know, they weren't going to pull the plug until Chris came.
Yep.
I don't know whose call that was. At the time, I was like absorbed in the fact that I was losing my brother, and you know, the fact that we had to wait for Chris. I don't care. I mean, he could still wake up, you know.
Right.
Well, Chris is on the way. We're not going to pull the plug until Chris comes. So, you know, there's still chance, you know.
Right.
And so, and then I know it was really awkward for Chris, you know, because he felt like everybody was waiting for him. But I don't think it was really the case. I think that we were waiting for Chris, but we were also waiting for a miracle.
Yeah.
Chris wasn't going to bring that miracle, but you know,
right.
It gave us a little more time.
Yeah.
You know?
And so, you know, here, present day, 2023. Like, what musically are you working on, and what direction do you want to go in? Are you hoping to still do stuff under the Malfunction moniker? Are you doing stuff that's solo? You know, I'm sure people are interested to know like what kind of endeavors you've got going on right now.
Well, I'm working on a new batch of material, and you know, I've been on the fence with calling it Malfunction, but that's kind of what I've been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
I've got a new batch of songs, like 6 new songs that I've got doing a remote session stuff with a guy down in LA and a guy in Seattle. And I've got a studio here where I, you know, record all my guitars and stuff. So I'm building stuff up, and you know, I don't know if I'm going to call it Malfunction this next time around or not. I probably will.
Yeah.
Because I've got some clever ideas for concepts and names and stuff. But yeah, I'm still doing it, and I'm actually getting some remote studio gigs. People who want me to do a little work on some of their projects.
Yeah,
which is cool. And I love doing that. So yeah, I'm still actively playing all the time. Still working on my chops. Still writing.
I feel like the Malfunction moniker is important though, because I mean, you know, I think especially in today's music world, it really seems like if you've got a brand, you kind of have to ride it out nowadays, because I mean, it's so hard in the music business today. It seems like, and I talk to a lot of musicians on here. You know, I've done 120 some odd episodes, and a lot of them are musicians, and the business has changed so much, and everybody's scratching and clawing to get recognized on these platforms and get their songs streamed. And, you know, obviously there's the absence now of the presence of record labels and contracts as we knew them, you know, from back in the day or whatever. So, you know, I think when you tap into something and you brand yourself a certain way, it probably is smart, because, you know, as you said, people look at you and they do think Malfunction.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a good point. And I think you're right. I mean, and I think that's what keeps me coming back to, you know, because, you know, I don't want to like wave my own flag in a big way, because it wasn't all my doing.
Right.
But I started the band
way
back in 1980, whatever.
Right.
And it was my idea. I came up with the name, and of course, Andy changed it to the phonetic spelling.
Right.
It was like putting his brand on things. But it was me asking him to be in my band, and then it just kind of took off from there. And you know, Andy can't be replaced.
Right.
And which is really sad, but I'm still here doing exactly the same thing that I've always been doing.
Yeah.
When you listen to the music, it's like, yeah, you listen to it carefully, you go, yeah, that's kind of the same thing he's been doing the whole time, but it keeps getting better.
Yeah.
You know?
And when you look back at that documentary, and so much, you know, it was, as I mentioned earlier, it was so candid, it was so in depth, it really did peel back the layers on like you guys as kids. And, you know, I touched on it, you know, your parents' marriage, you know, and then I obviously encompassed, you know, all the musical stuff or whatever. Were you in favor of doing something like that and bearing so much of the Wood family history on there? You know, was that something that you were like, yeah, like this is a good idea, you know, I'm on board with green lighting this, or did you have your reservations?
Well, I didn't know what it was going to be like in the end, you know, the end product. I didn't realize that it was going to be structured that way.
Yeah.
And I had seen so many different cuts, so many different versions of it.
Yeah.
and then the final version came out, and then after ingesting that, we all realized that it was kind of stilted in a way that was not really truly representative of the facts of the matter.
Yeah.
Because like I said, my mom was interviewed at a time that was very difficult for her.
Yeah.
Still blaming herself, and still coming up with all these ideas of why it happened, and all this stuff. And so, and then of course my interview, I'm not sitting in a studio with all my gear.
You're driving around.
I'm driving a taxi, man.
Yeah.
It's kind of my reality. And but it was exciting because it was a lot of promise, I think.
Yeah.
In that this was going to come out, and it was going to be a big deal, and there was going to be a lot of monetary reward behind it. That's kind of
right.
We were following this promise that really never materialized at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, with the music business having changed so much, now the last release you did under the Malfunction name, Glow, that was an EP. Do you have a definitive idea in your mind about, because the music business has changed so much, because everybody wants to stay relevant, a lot of bands are putting out singles, or they're doing smaller batches of well-crafted songs. Some people are staying away from the whole LP thing, just because people aren't consuming music that way anymore. Attention spans are way down. Do you have a definitive answer in your mind as to what's the right way that you want to release music? Do you like the singles thing? Do you like the EP? Do you still like to roll out an LP?
Well, I think that rolling out an LP, unless it's actually a physical LP, like on vinyl or a CD, is irrelevant, because basically people are going to pick the song they like.
They are, yeah.
And that's what's going to get traction. But I'm old school, so I'm thinking LP, EP. That's what I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't ever see a physical medium, it'll be a collection of songs that's published, as a set, as a group.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I like it. And when I shop for music, I want to get everything that everybody does. I don't like just pick songs. I know. Deep cut kind of guy,
Yeah. I've had that conversation with many musicians on here, and I do think that even if an album isn't necessarily per se labeled a concept album, I think they're all conceptual in a way, as far as like the cadence and the flow of the songs throughout. It's meant to be listened to in an immersive way. You put the thing on and you let the goddamn thing play till the end,
Yeah, exactly.
At least that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and even if the songs don't necessarily mean anything to one another, you still have the idea of what was going on during the production process.
Right.
You go, okay, well, this is definitely the same drummer, the same, ideas, the same time period. You get a glimpse into the artist's mentality and the artist's world when you listen to a collection.
Yeah. Do you think that, and of course, this is a big leap, and this is playing devil's advocate, but, if we could have kept Andy here, do you think that he'd still be somebody that would be involved in music? I mean, because I can't imagine him doing something that doesn't involve, a creativity.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He was a lifer. He would have been a lifer. Yeah.
I mean, he had he definitely wanted to branch off into other avenues of entertainment. He wanted to be a talk show host. He wanted to be a DJ, but at the same time, he was so good at making stuff up and creating music, and a lifer. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Jesus Christ, if he would have been on late night TV, I would have watched the Andy Wood Show. For God's sake, he couldn't have been any worse than Letterman or Leno.
It would have been better than Leonard.
Much better.
Because he was so funny.
Yeah.
And he was so right on with everything, That's the thing with, hanging out with him and enjoying time with him, is that he had a sense of humor.
Yeah.
He had a cadence, and he had a way that he cultivated. He could have been anything in that in entertainment. He could have been an actor. He could have been a talk show host. He could have been a game show host.
Yeah.
And a way of being in front of a crowd.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. You know what? I'm going to say it right now. 127 episodes, man. This has easily been one of my favorites, man. It's really been a pleasure getting the chance to talk to you, and really an honor, man. And you know, to me, man, you are one of those OGs, man. One of those fucking old school guys, like from that scene, who you know, whose music has just meant so much to me over the years. And I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this. I know we talked, you know, for quite a long time, and I'm glad we finally got to get on the same page and do this.
Yeah, me too, man.
Yeah, it's really been an honor, and I hope we can keep in touch. And when you got something cooking, hopefully we can get on here and we can do it again.
Absolutely, man. I'm so happy we finally made this happen.
Yeah,
and,
me too.
A good experience and a good interview. Is it nice to get to know you and get to see you?
The same here. And it's always nice to keep those people that we, you know, who meant a lot to us, you know, I mean, in very different ways, obviously, like you as a direct family member. But, you know, I think when someone's music resonates with you, you know, you do kind of start to feel like you know that person. You know what I mean? So, like, you feel like, you know, it feels good to keep those kind of people's memories alive, even if it's been, you know, 30 some odd years since Andy's passing. You know, it's nice just to be able to kind of like rekindle those good memories, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, it has been a while since he passed, but I feel no differently about it than I've ever felt, because, you know, he was a part of my family and my life. And even though it can be painful at times to be, reminded of the tragedy, at the same time, I'm reminded of the gift.
Yeah.
To have him for my little brother.
Yeah.
The gift of sharing the experience of playing live and all of the things that went along with it, all of the times that we shared. So it's all good, you know.
And not letting the grief overshadow the fact that, you know, I mean, like you know, they did leave us with stuff that we can celebrate as well. You know what I mean? So
and the grief is, you know, for the most part, not forefront anymore.
Yeah.
What we have now is an understanding, and as time goes by, a clearer understanding. Of what he really meant to us and everybody. Yeah. Because it blows my mind how many people have been touched by his presence in his short time here, and it warms my heart, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. It warms my heart to see you sitting there with a guitar in your hand. I'm glad you're still fucking doing it, and that you are a lifer, and look forward to everything that you do. I'm always watching and keeping track, and you know, trying to stay on top of what the artists who really mean a lot to me are out there doing. So anything that you do, I'm flying the flag for it, man. I am. Man. Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate you doing this, Kevin. Thank you so much, brother. And please keep in touch, man. And, you know, as soon as I put your episode up, I'll send you the link, and, you know, feel free to share it wherever, man. You betcha, man. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate you, brother. Thank you. It's great talking to you. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Later, brother. Appreciate it. Okay. Bye, man. Bye-bye. And there he goes, folks. I will sign off here as Kevin signs off. That is Kevin Wood. I'll keep tooting his horn for him while he's trying to figure out how to get out of this call, because we don't edit anything. I will sit here and continue to sit here and praise him and sing the virtues of Kevin Wood. Been doing it for so long. There might be a red button at the bottom that looks like a phone down there. You see it down there? There's like a red phone button at the bottom of your screen. There you go. There he goes, folks. I don't know if he can still hear us, man, but that is the great Kevin Wood, man. You know him from Malfunction. You better damn well know his fucking brother, Andy Wood, from Mother Love Bone, or else you are getting your rock/metal card fucking pulled, because he was a vital part of that fucking whole Seattle scene, man. Maybe the most vital, because I really think that he really embodied what that whole Seattle scene was really all about, man. The consummate performer, frontman, showman. If you don't know Andy Wood, if you don't know Mother Love Bone, this stuff all predates Pearl Jam. If Mother Love Bone does not become defunct, we do not get a Pearl Jam. Mother Love Bone, was Stone and Jeff, who obviously went on to be huge parts of Pearl Jam, Andy, and then, obviously there's a couple other players, Bruce Fairweather, Greg Gilmore, but Mother Love Bone, go back and do your homework. They had a very short-lived career, but they were fucking amazing. And even predating that was Malfunction, which was Andy's band with his brother Kevin and Reagan Hagar, and they were a force as well, just doing something very different. Creativity just oozing out of these fucking guys, man. I mean, Kevin, Andy, just so talented, and just gave so much of themselves and gave us such great music. Right up until, unfortunately, 1990, when Andy's untimely passing from the result of drug use. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there who miss him dearly, myself included, on a daily basis. Thank God we still have the music, and thank God that Kevin is still out there with guitar in hand, still flying the flag for Malfunction. It is fucking absolutely great. He is a true OG rock warrior of that fucking Seattle scene. Been doing it since the early fucking 80s, man. He is the architect really behind the original Malfunction. And then you heard him say that Andy kind of came in and, changed the spelling of the band and put his creative spin on it. But it was the Wood brothers right there, man, doing it and getting it on the ground floor of a scene that really took off and exploded. But they were there at the fucking forefront. So that was a real honor for me, getting a chance to chop it up with the great Kevin Wood of Malfunction. And, go keep tabs on Kevin. Any musical endeavors that he puts his stamp on are going to be interesting, to say the least, man. He's a very interesting, eclectic guy with a very unique guitar tone. Obviously, much like his brother Andy, super, super creative and prolific. So I want to thank him so much for doing the interview. Me and Kevin have been talking now for, probably the better part of a year, since going back when I started the podcast. We lost touch, we gained touch, and I never hold that against anybody, because when I can get you on the show, I get you on the show. Myself included, we all have fucking lives. We all get busy. I've got 3 grown kids and 6 fucking grandkids and a full-time job and a wife. So I understand it. I'm just so grateful that I was finally get the chance to have him on here, man. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed it. And I want to remind you guys, till we get together and we do this thing again, remember to take it easy and keep it sleazy.